Alright, what's happening? Y'all, it's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and now I am here to update y'all on the entire Nick Gates situation. And this is the funniest cut out of all of them, man, by far. Because at least the other two, you get a good amount of cap space in return. This Nick Gates one barely affects our cap space. They just clearly wanted him gone, man. They were sick of him. And that's really interesting with us hiring his ex-offensive lines coach from the Giants recently, just as of a month ago. So we're going to break down this whole Nick Gates situation, exactly how much cap space we get in return for this. I'm gonna give y'all a big time cap space update after we have officially cut Charles Leno, Logan Thomas, and Nick Gates. With all three of those guys cut, how much cap space do we have now? Are we still number one out of the cap space rankings? All of that type of stuff. And of course, we got to address, I mean, Nick Gates wasn't any good for real, but that's still you losing a center. So now we got to take a look at the guys that we currently have on roster. Are any of them potentially starting centers? And if not, we're going to take a look at some of the free agent options that may be out there that we could bring in to be our starting center, and also some draft options. And for those draft options, which rounds we may potentially get them in. So before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, man. I have so much working on, man. I have so many ideas. We're on the way. Just things like this push them to the background, but they're on the way, man. I mean, I think this is now what, the 5th video today, I believe, and I may do another one tonight after this one, so stay tuned. Make sure you have that bell hit next to the subscription button so you get a notification for every single one of these videos I'm releasing, because I'm keeping y'all updated on everything Commanders. This is your one-stop shop. Mock drafts, film sessions for draft prospects, everything is on the way, so stay tuned. I'm working on a trade back draft scenario because I feel like a lot of people are asking for that, even though I personally prefer to just go ahead and take Jayden Daniels or Drake May number 2 overall. People have been asking about a trade back scenario, so we're gonna do that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and focus on this video first though. Let's get it. Alright, so first of all, again, this is probably the funniest move out of all three, because we barely save any real cap space from cutting Nick Gates, man. They just wanted him gone, clearly. They felt like he was that bad, I guess. And thanks again, Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew, for that one as well. Thank you for that free agency signing. That did weight that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and all of those guys had to purge out of the roster. And thank goodness this front office and coaching staff, led by Adam Peters, is not playing it safe and keeping mediocrity around this franchise. If you're not good, you're gone. We'll just have to figure out what to do at the position later, but we are not allowing below average players to stick around out of fear that it may be difficult to find an upgrade somewhere, either through free agency or the draft. No fear here, and also no laziness in this franchise anymore. And the reason that it clearly shows that they are expecting greatness out of this team, because again, this guy barely saves you any cap space from cutting them. They're just literally there with no advantage as far as cap space goes. It's just like, man, this guy needs to be gone. At least Charles Leno, you could argue, okay, serviceable starter, but it makes more sense to cut him because you save so much money. Same thing with Logan Thomas. But with Nick Gates, you're only cutting him because you just want him gone. There's no real cap space benefits. And I don't think y'all know how bad this is and how funny this is, because cutting Nick Gates only saved us $333,000 in cap space. Not even $500,000. You can't do nan with that. You can't sign nan player with those signings, except for maybe like an undrafted free agent. And even then, I'm not even sure about that. I was just throwing a suggestion out there, but when you look at our roster, our lowest paid player on the roster is a set of undrafted free agents between Brandon Bouyer, Randall, wherever he came from, D'Angelo Mandel, wherever he came from, Bryson Tremaine, I remember him, undrafted free agent, Casimir Allen, re-signed as an undrafted free agent, Mason Brooks, also another undrafted free agent practice squad player that's been re-signed, and Nick Whiteside. All of those guys are tied for the lowest cap hits on our team, and they're all still making $795,000 this year. Cutting Nick Gates doesn't even pay for half of the cap hit that our lowest paid players make on the Commanders. I just want to put it in perspective how much this is not a cap space, a cap casualty savings type of thing at all. Like, not even a little bit, man. They just really just don't want him around anymore, and I can't blame them. That's a 90-man roster spot being taken up by somebody that's unplayable instead of a younger guy that may have some potential. You never know. The entire NFL is a crapshoot. The entire thing is a gamble. Even when you have guys like Adam Peters and Eugene Shen in your corner, it's still a gamble, and you never know that guy that we may end up signing as that 90th man may have some potential to him and end up becoming an impact starter further down the road. You just never know. It's not likely, but I prefer to take my chances with somebody that we don't even know exists yet that's going to potentially join our roster than when we already know in Nick Gates, which is not good. And don't forget, this guy Nick Gates got benched mid-season. I thought the Commanders were allergic to benching anybody other than Emmanuel Forbes, and even Nick Gates got benched. So that tells you everything you need to know about the fact that Ron Rivera and those guys, even as much as they accept being average, they still benched him, even in a season where it was pretty much lost and we really didn't have any serious playoff hopes. I mean, we started the year 2-0 and finished 4-13. Like, that's ridiculous, man. Like, that's absolutely just incredible ineptitude. And this is even more interesting because the Commanders just signed ex-Giants offensive lines coach Bobby Johnson. That was my first thought. Who coached Nick Gates in New York in 2022. Then we brought Nick Gates here in 2023, and then we brought his offensive lines coach here in 2024 just a month ago. And when we hired Bobby Johnson back then, like a month ago, I said it in the video. I said that I was afraid that this may mean that Nick Gates may not only stay for the 2024 season, but it is also likely that he may be our week 1 starter until Ricky Stromberg is ready to go, whether it be because of health or development or whatever. And I was really hoping that this wasn't the case. And now I'm ecstatic to find out that Adam Peters stepped in and was like, oh, nah, we are good on that one. And shouts out to Anthony Lynn because he probably has something to do with this decision as well. Being our run game coordinator, he's going to be in charge of the entire run game and things like that. He was probably looking at what our roster currently has in retrospect to what we could potentially get in free agency in the draft and was like, there's no way this guy makes sense to keep on the team right now. So, hey, man, but whoever's decision it was, Adam Peters has to sign off on anything. So even if it wasn't his decision, for him to agree to it, whatever mix of individuals it took to get Nick Gates off the team, thank you. I salute y'all, man. Again, the fact that we brought in his offensive lines coach from 2022 and he still got cut lets you know that relationships aren't everything. You need to be good here, man. You need to produce. We need to at least feel like you have potential to produce at least. So, yeah, man. If you get outperformed mightily by backup center Tyler Larson, you pretty much know you gotta go. He was probably already packing his bags before they even let him know that he was getting cut, because he even probably knew that he was getting cut after last year's performance. He probably already knew in the back of him, I got benched. Yeah, I'm out of here, man. Time to go ahead and hit free agency again once they cut me. And hey, shouts out to the Commanders for doing all of these cuts before free agency starts. Well, the legal tampering period starts March 11th, but technically free agency starts as of March 13th. But shouts out to them for cutting these guys way ahead of time so that these guys have time to potentially find another team to land on and actually compete and things like that. Maybe even get a chance to start. Shouts out to the Commanders for doing it the right way. And maybe that's a compliment to Bobby Johnson also, when you really think about it, that he had Nick Gates actually looking pretty decent on the Giants, at least good enough to where Rivera and company felt like he would be a good signing to bring here. Like, they had Rivera and company full. So maybe that's a compliment to Bobby Johnson, our new offensive lines coach, because he looked unplayable last year, whereas Bobby Johnson had him out there actually looking pretty decent. And I thought he was actually a pretty good signing when we signed him, especially for the extremely cheap money that we signed him to. So, hey, man, maybe Bobby Johnson is more of a wizard than we thought. To have that Nick Gates that got benched last year looking pretty good on the Giants O-line, looking like one of their only bright spots from the 2022 offensive line. But either way, Nick Gates is gone. Not going to dive into it too much as far as like just, I don't like jumping on a man while he's down and all of that type of stuff. So we're going to move on. But now we need a center. And even if he was still here, talking about Nick Gates, I would still say that we needed a center regardless. But either way, now that he's gone, we only have 2 centers on roster right now, technically. I like Tyler Larson, but I wouldn't consider him a bona fide week 1 starter. I'm comfortable with him potentially having a sub in if necessary due to injury or something, but I don't want to go into week 1 assuming that he's our starting center. I don't even necessarily want him competing for the starting center. I hope we have a guy that's so clearly better than Tyler Larson that Tyler Larson isn't even in competition with him. We just go into training camp assuming Tyler Larson is the backup. I mean, if Tyler Larson is your starter, if he gets hurt, who's your backup then? That's the same logic I had with Wes Schweitzer. Like, yeah, he's a pretty decent starting guard if you want him to be, but you don't want him starting because if he gets hurt, who's his backup? That's why I prefer him as like a premium backup, like a high-end backup. I feel like Tyler Larson is potentially that for center. Because again, Tyler Larson gets hurt, who's backing him up? Who comes in the game after that? Which takes me to Ricky Strongberg and Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew's 3rd round pick in the 2023 NFL draft. And don't get me wrong, I like his talent and potential, but I still feel like he was a reach in the 3rd round, man. I ain't even gonna lie to you. And even though he was starting to improve as the season went on, the man is coming off of injured reserve right now. He had a season-ending knee injury that required surgery. So even if he is 100% healthy, and that's a big if, because he may not be entering like early workouts in the offseason and things like that. But even if he is fully healthy, do we really trust him to potentially have to protect our future number 2 overall draft pick quarterback that it looks like we're going to end up taking? I mean, all signs are pointing towards that. By the day, it just seems more and more likely that we are taking quarterback 2nd overall from everything that's going down at the combine, rumors, reports that we're hearing from behind the scenes, all of that type of stuff. So do we trust Ricky Strongberg to potentially have to protect Jayden Daniels or Drake May? Again, I'm not considering Caleb Williams because I'm assuming he's going 1st overall, but I hope I'm wrong. That would be nice to get him. He's still our quarterback 1, but between Jayden Daniels and Drake May, I prefer Jayden Daniels. But either way, do we trust Ricky Strongberg to block for any of those guys right now? I don't know. And again, I like him and I like his potential. But just like Tyler Larson, man, I don't want to assume that Ricky Strongberg is our starting center going into week 1 of the regular season while we enter free agency, while we enter the draft. I don't want to have that as our mindset. I'm not that high on him. Plus, he was looking better at guard than center before he got hurt, in my opinion, anyway. And that's not the position that we're concerned about today in this video. We may have a little bit of concerns about guard who may potentially start there, even though I believe at left guard, between Sadiq Charles and Chris Paul, we will be all right to survive this season, and then maybe we go heavily on guard in the 2025 offseason free agency and draft. But I feel like we'll be straight. We'll be okay with those guys because Samuel Cosmi is a different type of guy at right guard. We're good there. But center, which is the point that I'm making in this video, I don't know, man. I really don't know. But if you do happen to be very confident in Ricky Strongberg as your starting center, then cool. I'm just not there yet personally. So just in case, let's look at some free agency options for starting centers that are out there this upcoming free agency cycle. And again, I know I keep saying this in all of my videos, but you never know. Some other guys may become available that we're not expecting right now because a team may cut them to save cap space. I mean, it was assumed that we were going to probably end up cutting Charles Leno and Logan Thomas, but it took us until March 1st to actually do it, when they could have been did it a while ago. So you never know, maybe for cap reasons or whatever may happen, whatever may go down in free agency, maybe somebody ends up releasing another good free agency center option out there for us. But as of right now, where things stand, and that goes for every position group, edge rusher, tackle, whatever. So be on the lookout for more players available in free agency than we even know as of today, because they just haven't been cut yet. Stay tuned for that. I'll definitely keep y'all updated on those things, especially at positions of need that we have. But first of all, you have Lloyd Cushenberry, and that's crazy that he's already an unrestricted free agent. I remember when he was coming out of LSU. I mean, that felt like it couldn't have been 4 years ago, man. That's crazy. That blew my mind when I was looking at free agent centers and saw that he was one of them. Oh man, that boy, I don't know where the past 4 years went. It's been a great journey with Street Scores though. I really appreciate y'all. But Lloyd Cushenberry is an unrestricted free agent, man. I don't know why that's completely blowing my mind right now. But he's been the center for the Denver Broncos, and he's been really good. You could argue he's probably the best center available in free agency, depending on how you evaluate these guys. Between him, maybe Connor Williams, maybe Matt Hennessy from the Falcons. It depends on what you prefer. I I would argue that Lloyd Cushenberry may be actually the best center available in this free agency class. And it's not a great free agency class because, first of all, Jason Kelce looks like he's definitely retiring, so don't include him. And then outside of that, those are really the top names that you have. Lloyd Cushenberry wise, they're projecting that he's going to get like a 4-year $57.1 million contract, which is like a 14.28 average annual value for that contract. So he'll take up around like $14 million per year against the cap on average. So I may be willing to do that, man, to fix the center position. I don't know. That is a lot of money to pay a center when you still have other bigger needs like tackle, tight end, especially after today, and most importantly, edge rusher, man. I don't know. The draft has some talent at those positions, but I feel like there's some pretty good centers in the draft, which we'll talk about later. So I'm not sure if I'm willing to give a guy like Lloyd Cushenberry $14 million a year to become our center, but we'll see. You never know. And then on the cheaper side, Connor Williams from the Miami Dolphins potentially could end up being a free agency target for the Commanders. They're projecting, Spot Track is, a 3-year $22.5 million contract, which would make him $7.5 million annually. And that's worth it, man. I think he would definitely come in with a higher floor than a Ricky Strongberg, especially if you don't trust him just yet, just like I don't. So Connor Williams, your starter, Taylor Larson as your backup just in case, and Ricky Strongberg as the guy that's still developing. I think that's a great center room that you have right there if you really want to go that route. And then especially, I think the only reason that he's going to be even able to go for that much money is because of the torn ACL that he suffered late in the 2023 season. Otherwise, he wouldn't be going for that cheap money. So he is a risk. You're definitely risking bringing in a starting center that's coming off of a severe injury. And will he even exactly be ready to go week 1? Who knows? That's why Lloyd Cushenberry, I feel like, is easily the best option in free agency, but he's also the most expensive. So if you're trying to look for the best value, maybe you have Connor Williams. But of course, with him tearing an ACL late in 2023, I mean, that's risky for week 1. Maybe you start Tyler Larson week 1 and then until Connor Williams is ready to come back healthy, or maybe Ricky Strongberg surprises everybody, develops way quicker and sooner than we expect, and now he's ready to start. Who knows? We'll see. Then you also have Matt Hennessy from the Falcons. Spot Track doesn't have a market value for him yet, but he's a pretty good center, and I think that would be a nice guy with some potential that we could potentially bring in here, because he had an 88.1 run blocking grade according to Pro Football Focus, which was 3rd amongst all centers. So hey man, just watch out for him. That was back in 2021 though. Now in 2023, he had a knee injury that he suffered in training camp. So this is another guy with injuries, that with the injury history that we may want to be weary of, that we may want to avoid. But that's another name to throw out there. That's just how weak this center class is. And then the San Francisco 49ers, maybe Adam Peters, but most notably Anthony Lynn, who's coming here to be our run game coordinator, brings Joe Feliciano with him to be the center for the Commanders. And this is a guy that they're projecting him to get a cheap prove it deal, 1 year, $2 million contract. That's it, just a $2 million cap hit. And I mean, at the very least, maybe bring him in to compete, but I wouldn't bring that guy in and assume that he's a starter. So if you go and sign like a Joe Feliciano in free agency from the San Francisco 49ers, now you have Tyler Larson, him, and Ricky Strongberg, I would still draft center in the draft by like round 3 or 4. I think it's that serious, man. I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I'm afraid about this center position right now. I really am. So now let's move on to the draft, where I feel like our best chance of addressing and finding a starting center lies, because the free agency ugly. Current roster, not too sure about it, but the draft is where I have my most hope, because a lot of people feel like Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon is the best center in the draft, and he may end up going late first, but you never know. Maybe he makes it to one of our 2nd round picks, maybe our 2nd one, because we really need to go tackle in the 2nd round with our first 2nd round pick, if a good enough tackle even makes it that far, like a Troy Fatanu, or hopefully like an Amarius Mims from Georgia, something like that. And then I'm just assuming that we go all in on an elite edge rusher in free agency, so that we don't necessarily have to take one in like the 2nd round. We can wait till like the 3rd or 4th. We'll see. So if you want Jackson Powers Johnson, maybe he makes it to the 2nd round, one of our 2nd round picks. You also have Zach Frazier from Virginia. A lot of people feel like he may make it to potentially like the 3rd round, maybe late 2nd. Then you have my Georgia dog, Cedric Van Pran, and I'm still not sure why a lot of people aren't higher on him. And I think he can come in and immediately be your day 1 starting center, franchise center for the next 10 plus years. I'm that high on him. Maybe I'm biased, but I'm just not seeing why people don't see the greatness in Cedric Van Pran. But either way, some people predict that we may be able to get him with our early 3rd round pick. pick. So maybe we wait until then and then we get a bona fide starting center there. There's a lot of options. You have Drake Nugent from Michigan. You have Bo Limmer from Arkansas, Dylan McMahon, however you pronounce his name, from North Carolina State, Matt Lee from Miami is an interesting prospect, Andrew Ram, Tanner Bortolini from Wisconsin. There's a lot of options out there. Not necessarily a lot of great ones, but some interesting projects that we could potentially get like 4th round or later. Or if you want a bona fide starter, it's between one of those first 3 I said, between Jackson Powers Johnson, maybe late 1st, early 2nd, Zach Frazier somewhere in the 2nd, maybe with our second round pick, or maybe potentially our early 3rd round pick. And the same thing goes for Cedric Van Pran. You may be able to get him with the early 3rd round pick. Again, I'm really confused why people are not higher on Cedric Van Pran, but hey, man, I guess we'll see. And then now next up, let's do a cap space savings update. Now, of course, after cutting Charles Leno and Logan Thomas, the Commanders saved $13.78 million in cap space. And again, cutting Nick Gates really didn't do anything cap space wise. It doesn't even move that number. So basically, it's the same amount as it was after we only just cut Logan Thomas and Charles Leno. But again, just in case if you didn't see those other videos, just to give you an update. And I don't know what the Bears and Patriots did, just like I talked about in my previous videos as well, because we were #1 in cap space for like the past few months. Suddenly I look up, we're #3 as of just like a few days ago. And after we cut Charles Leno, we moved up to 2nd. And then after we cut Logan Thomas, apparently we moved back up to #1 according to My Sports Update. Even though when I go to Spot Track, they say that it's still the Patriots. But My Sports Update, aka Ari Marov, however you pronounce his name, that does a lot of NFL updates and things like that on Twitter, he tweeted out the Commanders now have a league-high $91 million in salary cap after releasing Logan Thomas and Charles Leno. I guess you could throw Nick Gates' name in there. But again, he didn't really put much of a dent into it. And I think that it's really interesting that we cut our 4th, 6th, and 7th highest paid players on the Commanders today and still only gain less than $14 million worth of cap space. Typically, if you look at most NFL rosters, if they cut or traded away their 4th, 6th, and highest paid players, they would get back way more than just $14 million worth of cap space. So that's how you know our roster is very empty. Our punter and Tressway is now the 7th highest paid player on our entire roster after these cuts. That is why we literally have the most cap space in the NFL. It's not like we just have this complete roster and then all of that money in cap space is just money for us to go into free agency to spend because it's just extra money on the side. We could just go get guys from other teams. I want y'all to remember, man, that we still need to fill out this roster first. We currently only have 49 players on roster out of the 90 that we're supposed to end up getting once we start all of the off-season workouts and things like that. And even if all of those players that we end up signing to get up to 90 aren't going to be expensive, some of them are going to be. All of them are going to cost at least a little bit of money, minimum more money than what we got in return for releasing Nick Gates, which is really funny. So by the time we actually start to try and sign guys from other teams as of March 11th, March 13th, and all of that, I doubt we'll have an NFL leading $91 million worth of cap space, just to give y'all the heads up. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm just trying to keep y'all with a realistic viewpoint on what's going on with this cap space situation. And a lot of the players that we need to re-sign that most Washington fans aren't calculating, again, a lot of people aren't thinking about the fact that we lost a lot of starters. A lot of those guys we need to re-sign are starters. So they're going to probably, if we do end up bringing them back, we need to pay them good money. And if they don't come back, we're going to have to find somebody at the very least to the equivalent of what they were and pay them pretty decent money. So either we're going to end up with less money than we think entering free agency to sign players from other teams, or we're going to have more holes on this roster than we think entering free agency before we try to sign guys from other teams. It's going to be one of the other, so just keep that in mind. We got to choose our poison, basically. But still, this is a great opportunity to completely flip this roster upside down in just one offseason if Adam Peters and the guys really want to. And if they want to set it up to where we can spend big money in free agency, they can. We just got to see how it all plays out. It never hurts to have the most cap space in the NFL. I'm not saying that at all, but I just want y'all to keep in mind that we don't even have a full roster yet. And some of the guys that we may potentially re-sign may eat up a lot of that #1 cap space in the NFL cap space that we're bragging about right now. So just keep that in mind. But remember, Adam Peters did already tell us that he didn't want to necessarily just go on an immediate spending spree in his first year here. But that doesn't also mean that he will not go and get at least a couple of top free agents at positions of need. Like, luckily for us, we have so much money that we can make one or more splash signings and still potentially have a lot of money left to fill out the roster with the re-signings and depth players from other rosters, and go bargain bin shopping to just basically fill out the roster so we can have a complete team and a 90-man roster to actually go into mini camp and all of that stuff with OTAs, training camp, and all of that. So man, I just wanted to give y'all a very realistic perspective to the fact that, yeah, we have the most cap space in the NFL, but that's for more than one reason other than the fact that we just have money to spend. Just to give y'all the heads up. But either way, man, I'm super excited. The Adam Peters era has begun, and he's taking his first steps into turning the Commanders into a future Super Bowl contender. Welcome to the competent Commanders organization, fans, man. We're finally building something competent, and hopefully it turns into greatness. And then, of course, I also hope that this greatness is long-term and consistent and not just a flash in the pan. So welcome to the new era of the Commanders. Adam Peters has made his first moves and decisions, cutting Charles Leno, Logan Thomason, and Nick Gates. I mean, technically, again, we went and signed Mason Brooks and Casimir Allen as practice squad players for very cheap. That was technically the very first move, the first roster decision, but technically Charles Leno was the first, Logan Thomas was the second, and now Nick Gates is the third, and now we're about to take off. I'm super excited because, again, I'm having full faith in giving this organization the benefit of the doubt, led by Adam Peters making all the decisions, or at the very least having the last say on a lot of things on the football side, that if we're cutting these guys this early without having a, like, waiting until like free agency to where we've already, like, we went and got a center, and then now we cut Nick Gates because we know we have a guy. Same thing with cutting Charles Leno, maybe waiting until free agency or the draft to make sure you get a guy that's good enough to replace Charles Leno, then cutting them. The fact that we went ahead and cut them early lets me know that whatever's going on at the combine with them rubbing shoulders with all these other GMs and NFL agents, they must have like a good backup plan to their backup plan to their backup plan. So when in doubt, if they don't get their top target, they have another guy that they're willing to go with, and they're good. Like, we should have a good starting left tackle entering the 2024 regular season, whether it's through the draft or free agency. They have a plan, and hopefully they have some backup plans. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt until they don't deserve it anymore. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm that subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release all of these types of videos. Man, I'm keeping y'all updated on everything Commanders, but we also have some really fun video topics that we're gonna start diving into as well. A lot of what ifs, a lot of different scenarios, free agency wish list. I'm gonna do a video on our top team needs as far as positions go, and I'm gonna rank them and everything like that as far as how dire the situation is, all of that. So make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, mock drafts, film sessions for a lot of the draft prospects as we get closer to the draft, April 25th. Of course, I'll be live streaming the draft all rounds as well, especially at the minimum rounds 1 through 5. So stay tuned for all of that. I really appreciate y'all. Catch y'all later. I'm out.